Welcome to Pratidwani, where we try to humanize science. On this episode, I'm delighted to introduce my guest, Nirmalya Kajuri. Nirmalya is joining us as a part of the Emergence series on Pratidwani. And for people who don't know Nirmalya, and you should be knowing him, is a theoretical physicist and an assistant professor working at Indian Institute of Technology, Mandi. He is also an outstanding science communicator, and many of his writings and Twitter blogs and Twitter posts have literally become viral. More importantly, he is also an excellent researcher, and he writes on various different topics. His research also encompasses various different aspects related to quantum gravity, uh, holography in the high energy physics aspect, black holes, and many other aspects of cosmology. So, Nirmalya, with this introduction, I welcome you to Pratidwani.
Thanks, Pavan. Thanks for the kind introduction. And also, thanks for doing this program where you turn the highlight on all the scientists.
Yes, yes. Thank you very much for joining. So, Nirmalya, give us a kind of an overview of your biography, your career trajectory until now, right from the beginning when you got started at school, and how did you really became a researcher and also an excellent science communicator.
Oh, got started at school, huh? Okay. I think early on, I think the idea of being a scientist, there was something that my mom put into my head. It was
Mhm.
kind of her dream that I should contribute to humanity with science or something. And I kind of latched onto that idea growing up that I have to become a scientist already as a child. Although at that
Mm.
point I did not have any particular interest in science, what I really liked at that age were stories. So I was reading a lot,
Nice.
consuming a lot of stories. Uh, but everyone who asked me like, "What are you going to become when you grow up?" which is
Hmm.
something
Hmm.
to ask you, and I would say, "Oh, I'm going to become a scientist." So it became
Nice.
part of my identity early on, and
Hmm.
the popular science I was reading at the time, as is most popular sciences, was centered
Mm.
around space and physics and all that. So I thought,
Yeah.
physics was the science, so to speak. And then later, I think during my plus twos, I was having second thoughts. I was wondering, if this
Hmm.
really
Hmm.
is the right line for me. Uh, Again, there was nothing specific that I was really wanted to do. My favorite subjects, my strongest subjects in during plus twos were, apart from maths and physics, was English. So I
Nice.
was
Nice.
writing essays and stuff, which was going well, and I wasn't sure.
This is in which place and which year roughly?
Kolkata,
Around what time?
this is my plus twos were around 2003, 2004.
Mm-hmm.
So my 10th was in 2002,
Mm-hmm.
and
Hmm.
so this is around 2004.
And
And so
you were born and brought up in Kolkata, is
I
it?
was
Or
born and brought up in Kolkata. I was born and brought up
nice,
in Kolkata.
nice, nice, very nice.
Yeah. So at that point, I was wondering, if I should become a writer of some kind. Where also I
Mm-hmm.
was leaning towards physics because of the whole, I'm going to become a scientist, that thing.
Mm-hmm.
And at this point, I read this book by Richard Feynman, which is a character of physical laws. It's an
Mm-hmm.
old book, and it's a beautifully written book, and it tipped the scale in favor of physics for me, because there was a lot of, I was like, yeah, okay, this is this seems like fun, this seems like very mysterious stuff. Especially he had a lot of stuff about wave particle duality, and how this
Mm-hmm.
double slit interference experiment, which was really kind of mystical, like, okay, what's happening. So I thought, yeah, I really thought that I would be missing out if I didn't know more about this field.
Nice, nice, nice.
So then I kind of joined physics, and
Mm-hmm.
I should mention that before I joined college, so my college was in Jabalpur University, and after 12th, there's this gap where you have some free time after 12th exams and before joining college.
Mm-hmm.
And I spent some of that time reading this old book by Resnick and Halliday, which was a old physics book, which has some subsequent editions which are not as good, but the older one was golden.
Yes, yes, yeah.
And that kind of that had this perspective, kind of operational perspective, where you have to think about when you have any kind of physical law, like a Newton's law, F is equal to ma. It really made you think, how do you actually verify that? How do you define your quantities, your variables or laws in a way that you can check? So they were very careful with that thing. And I mention
Mm-hmm.
this because I absorbed that kind of thinking, and it played a role later in my research career. So
Wonderful,
yeah, so
wonderful.
then and yeah, so this was the school part of it, and then
Mm-hmm.
I joined Jadavpur University as a college, which was a fascinating place. Now that I look back on it, it was a fascinating environment to be in
Mm-hmm.
many different ways. And although we spend a lot of time bunking classes and chatting on everything under the sun, it's very Bengali, like adda that we say.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But even within that, we had a lot of discussions on physics with my friends. So everyone was excited
Nice.
about physics. There was a lot of excitement around thinking about physics, and there was a lot of amazing teachers uh,
Mm-hmm.
that we had. So we had teachers. I should name a few. Somen Kumar Roy was one of our teachers. Ranjan Bhattacharya, Narayan Banerjee, who is now in ISAR, Ananda Dasgupta. All these
Mm-hmm.
people had a real love for the subject, which
Yeah, yeah.
really impressed upon us. A love for
Mm.
physics, and now that I teach, I can only strive to emulate how good they were.
Emulate. Nice. Yeah, it has a very rich history. The Jadavpur University, uh, especially physics department, of course, and also other departments too, have very rich tradition of training not only good students in terms of research, but also I think some of the very big teachers have come out of that place, right?
Yes, yes, absolutely.
Mhm.
Absolutely. And there was a certain vibe. Apart from just the
Mm,
physics, it was a formative experience in that there was a very, relaxed environment, very
mm.
closely knit community of seniors and juniors, and also like sense of not having to protest against any kind of injustice from authorities, which
Yeah,
also
yeah,
you take from places like that.
nice,
But
very
also,
nice.
I was in a great batch with a lot of great students, and I think there are maybe, I think, 7 or 8 of us who are still in research, were currently faculty members somewhere in India. So
Nice.
this was a batch of people who wanted, a lot of whom wanted to do research. So that was also
Mhm,
very helpful. So I was there for 5 years. I did both my bachelor's and master's.
mhm.
Masters because I did not qualify jam or just or anything. And I realized that I'd been spending a little too much time on non-academic things and
Mm,
had to
mm,
do a little more work during my masters. But already in my BSc had kind of encountered the concepts which would eventually inform my choice of research.
mm, mm,
The concepts of space and time that came in, that I encountered when studying special relativity.
mm,
So, in special relativity, you was the first time you are made to think about these concepts of space and time. And as I was telling you, like from Resnick and Halliday, I had this whole thing about how to define things in terms of how they are measured. And
mm,
then there were
mm,
these concepts of space and time, which was not clear how you measure them. We don't see space and time. What we see are but they are there, they're fundamental concepts in physics, but
yeah.
do they really exist independently of things that we see? So there was my thinking at that time. So I was thinking that, okay, we can't measure time without a clock, and
Yeah.
clock is another physical system. So I'm
Mm,
actually measuring a relation between the motion of one object, which is whatever is moving, and the motion of another object, which I'm calling a clock.
mm,
So yet in Newton's laws, these are fundamental concepts. So it seemed to me that this should be relational concepts, and I figured I had to learn general relativity to get to the bottom of this.
mhm, mhm,
And then at some point, probably during my masters, I thought, okay, I have to study quantum gravity to really get to the bottom of things, because
mm,
then what is space and time quantum mechanically?
mm,
And even in quantum mechanics we use the Newtonian concepts of absolute space and time. And
Mhm.
how would it work if these things were go away? How would quantum mechanics work? How does it make sense to have a quantum theory of space and time itself? So this is where my fascination about quantum gravity came from at that stage, and
Nice.
not from something technical which I didn't know, but from this
Mm,
kind of conceptual confusions, if you will.
mm.
And but I also knew it was an unsolved problem, and with the unspoiled ambition of youth, I thought, okay, I'm going to solve it.
Nice. Nice.
So then I went. When I went for my PhD, I wanted to study quantum gravity,
Mhm.
and at that time I did not want to do string theory, because my
Uh-huh.
knowledge was that string theory was more of a, it kind of had this old concepts of background space and time where
Mhm.
they
Mhm.
quantize gravity, but uh, my knowledge was wrong. It was
Mm.
very limited. It's a background independent theory. But at this point, I had read this famous book by Lee Smolin, which was an
Mhm.
anti-string book, The Trouble with
Mm.
Physics,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
where he went on about how string theory is not background independent, loop quantum gravity is. And I
Mm.
was drawn to it. He seemed like being sympathetic to the same kind of questions that I had in mind. So I thought,
Mhm.
okay, maybe the non-string people may be more interested in the conceptual questions.
Mm.
String
Mm.
theorists seem to be more into the technical things. That was the impression I had at that time. And really, so then I thought, okay, I didn't think loop quantum gravity was correct, because in my mind, even then I was thinking that, okay, I'm going to be the one to give the correct theory.
Nice.
But then I thought, okay, let's try this one,
Mm.
and I
Mm.
joined Institute of Mathematical Sciences for my PhD, which was one of the very few places where there was someone who was working on loop quantum gravity.
Mhm.
My advisor, Ghansham Date, and I started working with him. And Sham was really one of the nicest people you'll ever meet, very caring, and
Mm.
also
Mm.
absolutely very sharp of his. It very hard to keep up with his speed of thinking and computing. And then I started working on loop quantum gravity there.
Mm. Mm. Very nice.
And so then,
So,
yeah, go on.
yeah, just for the listeners, IMSC is Institute of Mathematical Sciences in Chennai. That's actually one of the premier institutes in which a lot of theoretical physics and also mathematics research goes on, right? Even computer science and other
Yes, yes,
areas. Yeah,
exactly. So,
yeah,
physics, maths, and theoretical computer science are the three
mm,
streams there, and now also
yeah.
computational biology.
Wow.
And
Yes.
yeah,
Yes. Yeah. Very nice. Yeah. Yeah. Please go ahead. Yeah.
yeah. So, PhD was a bit of a struggle for me.
Hmm.
And okay, so let me talk about it a little bit. Although this is
Mm,
mostly about research, but I think
mm.
this would be maybe helpful for students. So the
Yes.
thing
Yes.
is, with loop quantum gravity, there was one had to use a bit of advanced math, which I was encountering for the first time, and
Mm,
that was a bit difficult. And the difficulty had to do with not knowing how much I needed to get started with, how much time I should allocate to uh, learn these new things.
mhm,
In general, I think when you transition from coursework to research and you have to go through literature, that is always a little bit difficult,
mm, mm,
because there's a lot of things that you don't know, and it's not clear how to. It's not linear anymore when you start encountering literature. So that's a difficulty everyone has, and with loop quantum gravity, it was slightly difficult because there was a lot of advanced math
mm, mm,
I did not have the background for. So what would happen was I would work with roadmaps which are quite unrealistic for me,
mm,
and then
mm,
I would try to learn everything before starting the literature,
mm,
learn all the math before starting the literature, which was a totally wrong approach. And then I would get stuck somewhere, and then I would not know what to do.
mhm,
and this kind of compounded the pressure on me. Then I would abandon things, and then I would get into a lot of pressure to complete the tasks. What I should have done is I should have gone to my advisor and asked
Mm,
him for help, asked him where things I was stuck in and clear my confusions, and he was
mm,
more than ready to help every time I asked.
mm,
But somehow
mm,
at that stage I was either too shy to ask for help. I mean, both too
mm,
shy to ask for help, and also somehow had the idea that I was expected to learn everything on my
mm.
own
Everything on, yeah, yeah.
instead of seeking help. So I
Mm,
let the problems fester, and I was not working. I was barely working. So that
mm.
that is something I learned. I bring these struggles up, Pavan, because in case students are listening and who
Yes,
might
yes,
face the same issues, because PhD can be quite isolating and stressful, because
absolutely.
you may not have support, and there was no one else working on this, so I do not have anyone
Mm,
to talk to.
mm, mm.
And one of the lessons you learn is to learn to ask for help. It's kind of a superpower when you finally kind of learn to ask for help. And
Absolutely, absolutely, yeah.
so it was a struggle, and finally I got to my fifth year with only one paper,
Mm,
and I had to seek an extension. So far from developing a new theory of quantum gravity,
mm.
even finishing my PhD was looking like a challenge at that stage.
Challenge, yeah, yeah.
And something which helped at that stage, which kind of illustrates the importance of having supportive mentoring friends, was that Alok Ladha, who joined as a faculty in Chennai Mathematical Institute, which is a neighboring
Mm.
institute,
Yes,
and he
yeah.
had done his PhD from Institute of Mathematical Sciences in loop quantum gravity
Mhm.
before me. He had left before I joined, and when he
Mm,
returned
mm,
to Chennai, I had someone to talk to, who was also a friend,
mm, mm.
and so yeah, Alok will hate it when he hears this public praise I'm giving him. Exactly why I'm saying nice things about you, which is that he was around and he was generous with his time and support to everyone. And
Mhm.
if he had not been around, I would probably have left physics. And
Wow,
yeah, it
fantastic.
was.
Mm,
And just talking about physics, really helped. Just having someone to talk to, and even
mm, mm,
casual conversations, small things,
mm,
just conversations about drinks and such, where
mm,
he would
mm,
mention some small thing, would often clear up a lot of my misunderstandings and confusions and help me gain
mm,
a perspective. So then that helped me keep in research.
mm,
And then so my research at this time, let me come back to my research,
mm,
was
mm,
in this field of something called polymer quantization.
mm,
And so
mm,
this is some kind of cousin of loop quantum gravity. So in loop quantum gravity, you're trying to get a quantum theory of gravity, and you
mhm,
have some kind of strategy or algorithm where you start from your classical theory of general relativity, and it takes you to some quantum theory.
mm, mm,
And this is quite hard, and this is still a work in progress to get a unique quantum theory of gravity using this loop quantum algorithm. So people try to do this for toy models, and one of those toy models is trying to do this for ordinary quantum field theory or ordinary quantum mechanics. And this
mm,
gives
mhm.
theories, toy models, which are called polymer quantum theories, and those were what I was working on.
Okay. So polymer in this sense is to you essentially have some kind of blocks, and you also connect those blocks together to form a larger block or something like that. In terms of the analogy to conventional polymer, is there a reason why it's called polymer?
Yeah,
I'm
this is
just curious.
something everyone asks, like, why is it called polymer?
Huh, huh.
It comes from the fact that in loop quantum gravity, the fundamental structure of space seems to
Mm.
be like polymers. So it seems like
Ah,
gives a connected network which looks like
network.
polymers. So that's where the name polymer comes from.
Nice,
Finally,
nice.
I used to get a lot of journal invitations and conference invitations from people who work on actual polymers.
That's yeah, that usually happens. Nowadays, even in this particular spamming age, it might be even more probably.
Yeah, it's even more, but even then it was, uh, yeah. So yeah,
Nice.
So my first paper was on this symmetries of polymer theories with my advisor,
Mm,
and my second paper was about developing a path integral formalism. So this was had been done in canonical formalism. There are these two
mm,
ways of approaching quantum field theory: path integrals and canonical formalisms. And people had worked on the canonical part, and my second paper was developing the same thing in a path integral language. And this was a single author paper that I wrote. What had happened
nice.
was my advisor was writing a book on general relativity,
Mm,
which
mm,
is an excellent book, by the way, and
mm,
he took some time off to finish it. So I had some free time where I
mm,
could do stuff on my own, and then I attempted to do this extend the path integral formalism, which had been developed for
mm.
the quantum mechanics version of polymer quantum theories, and I wanted to do it for fields.
Nice,
So it was
nice.
a problem that essentially got solved by developing a notation, and I managed to write this paper, which was these are the two papers in my thesis. So,
Mhm,
and writing this second paper after years of difficulties gave me some amount of confidence. Uh, and then before leaving, I finished one more paper, which was also on polymers, but it
mhm,
had some
mhm,
physics idea in it. The earlier one
mm,
was mainly formalism,
mm,
but in the third one, I was looking at there are certain class of these polymer field theories which violate your Lorentz transformation symmetry, the symmetry of special relativity. And then
nice.
there's a way of getting some predictions from these theories, that how can you actually check whether they violate Lorentz symmetry. And
Mhm,
I wrote a paper on that, and that also kind of gave me some belief that maybe I could survive in academia.
nice,
So
nice.
so that was me up to my PhD.
Wonderful. And
And
then you went on to do a postdoc within India, right? That is another thing I would want to again touch upon a little bit going
yeah,
forward.
yeah.
Yeah.
So what happened was I
Yeah.
actually did not get a postdoc anywhere.
Okay, okay.
Everywhere I had applied to had turned me down, and I did not
Mm.
know what to do next after my
Mm,
PhD.
mm,
So once again, Alok came to my rescue and offered
mm,
me a
mm,
visit. So in CMI, so CMI did not have postdocs then,
mm,
but he had a Ramanujan fellowship, and he gave me
mm, mm.
a visiting position there for a few months. So
Yeah.
eventually, I did get a postdoc in IIT Madras, where there was a
Mm,
cosmology gravity group
mm,
with Sriram Kumar, who is principally a cosmologist, and Daud
mm,
Kothawala, who is more interested in quantum gravity. So I joined there,
mm. Nice,
and there
nice.
after 3 months as a visitor in CMI, I started in IIT Madras. But at this point, I was kind of done with loop quantum gravity. I did not believe it was
Mm,
the correct approach to quantum gravity, and I wanted to shift to holography, which is
mm,
related to
mm.
string theory. So I had come full circle, and now I wanted to go to string theory. But while in IIT Madras, I was doing some work on polymers, and because
Mm,
that is a field that I had learned, and I could write papers on it, while also trying to transition to holography. So
mhm,
I was there for 2.5 years, and then I applied for a NPDF, which
mm.
is the National Postdoctoral Fellowship
Postdoctoral.
in,
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
CMI with Alok. And then I was there in CMI for a couple of years.
Mm, mm.
And then the pandemic struck, and I
Mhm.
spent a year in Kolkata. I
Mm.
was in ISCS as a postdoc.
Yes, yes,
And
yes.
after that, I joined IIT Mandi. So in
Very
between, I worked
nice.
on various small things, but I was always trying to kind of go towards holography. And
Mm,
eventually, I
mm.
think in 2021, I started working I wrote my first paper on holography finally.
Wonderful, wonderful. This is a really interesting kind of career trajectory, Nirmalya, for at least couple of reasons. One is that you held on to your interests in spite of the fact that you had issues going through the final years, especially, right? Because I
Mhm.
think that would have been a tough phase for you. And the second point is that you also have been successful in actually doing good work, and also communicating work in a very specific way, by working all through in India. This is always a point of concern to a lot of students, right? Especially those who are in a dilemma of whether to go out or not. Sometimes there is some kind of an issue for various different reasons. Many may not be able to make a move, and you have actually successfully gone through that phase, and you're now a faculty member at an IIT. So is this a common thing what you have found, or is this some kind of an exception for the kind of trajectory you have had? Can you just let us know?
Yeah, I think it is probably going to become more common.
Hmm.
As now that there's a lot of good work happening in India, it was
Yeah.
not so common before. And even when
Hmm.
I was applying in certain places, I was asked that why didn't you do a
Hmm.
postdoc outside?
Hmm.
And this question was asked to me in the process of
Hmm.
faculty
Hmm.
recruitment.
Yeah.
So there is
Yeah.
definitely, I think, still there is some hang up about having
Hmm.
to go abroad.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I also believe that, particularly if you're working on your own, and
Hmm.
of
Hmm.
course it's good to get exposure from different places, talk to as many
Absolutely. Yeah.
different people as possible, get
Hmm.
but it's also possible to do good work staying in India, especially if you're mostly
Hmm.
working on your own. You, you would you should be able to
Hmm.
work in India as well.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
I think now that the level of research is developing a lot. There's a lot of
Hmm.
good research happening everywhere in India. I think we will see more and more similar career trajectories where
Absolutely.
people do
In
everything
fact,
in.
I knew partly about this story what you just mentioned through your thread in one of your Twitter kind of post. You had mentioned about this, right? About how the last phase, a small mistake was kind of corrected, and that saved your PhD or something like that, right? That
Yeah,
is
yeah,
something
yeah,
which is yeah,
yeah.
very very interesting. So now we're going to just take it a little broader and kind of explore your deep interest not only in research but also in communicating physics, or more so communicating science itself. I know as part of faculty member as a faculty member at IIT, you will have to also teach. Tell us a little bit about how you kind of developed this interest of communicating science, especially using social media tools, particularly on X, which is erstwhile Twitter. You have actually written a lot of interesting stuff, which is not only read only in India. In fact, you have a probably very big audience across the world. Tell us a little bit about how did that happen? What was your thought process? How did you develop that interest and other things?
Yeah. It actually happened rather accidentally. There was not a lot of conscious thinking that went into it.
Mm.
So
Okay.
what
Okay.
happened? So
Uh,
I always like to write. I was
yeah. Yeah.
as I was telling you that even in school, one of my favorite subjects was writing essays in English.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
even when I was struggling with my PhD, I
Mm,
found
mm.
an outlet in writing restaurant reviews for Zomato, which was a
Wow, wow. That is wonderful. I did not know that. Okay. Okay.
it was an upcoming company at that time, and it offered a lot of
Yeah.
prizes for writing good reviews. So I
Uh-huh.
being a foodie who likes to eat out, and
Uh-huh.
I used to write reviews, and I won a few prizes at that time, and I was listed as one of Zomato top foodies in Chennai, to the extent of
Wonderful.
getting requests from restaurants to come and eat there for free and review them.
Wow. That's amazing. A theoretical physicist writing restaurant reviews. That's amazing.
So yeah, so that's I did not have the idea of bringing together my science and writing. So I was
Mm,
writing as
mhm.
a kind of outlet, as a kind of just something I enjoyed doing. I wrote a lot for the website Quora as well, and made a lot of
Cora.
friends
Okay.
there too.
Okay. Nice.
And
Nice.
finally, the writing about science, it started kind of accidentally. So I had a group of
Mm,
friends outside of physics,
mm,
and who used to play this game of Dungeons and Dragons together. So,
mm.
and through that game, I met Vasudevan Mukund, who
Uh-huh.
was a science editor of The Wire Science at that time.
Mm. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
he's a great editor, and he also loves physics.
Mm,
And he
mm,
kind of got me into writing for the Wire,
mm.
me into writing an article for the Wire, which was the first piece of science writing I did,
Yeah.
still
Yeah.
during my postdoc.
Mm,
And then I wrote another article for the Wire Science about black
mm.
holes. So I was kind of getting started into science writing that way.
Nice. Nice.
But as a postdoc, I was mostly operating in some kind of a survival mode most of the time.
Mm, mm,
Uh,
mm,
Having to get a job, focused on papers and so on. After I got faculty position, I thought I can have a bit more fun now. So
mm,
I
mm.
took my dormant X account, which was there for a long time.
Uh-huh.
And since there was a, in Monday it gets very cold and there's not much to do
Yeah.
in the evenings. So I thought I would make it a kind of side quest to do some science outreach, and
Nice.
I
Nice.
try to bring my love of writing, and also my love of being funny and making
Mm.
memes together with science. And
Yeah. Yeah.
it has been a lot of fun to do this.
Wonderful. Wonderful. So you also kind of think through the kind of stuff you want to write, because you of course also have written outlets such as Wire and the Hindu. Recently, in this year, you have written a very interesting articles around the cusp of the Oppenheimer movie. You wrote a very beautiful article related to Oppenheimer and the black hole physics, which he actually played a critical role in establishing. So, how do you go about kind of planning this out? Is there a specific thought process you think about, or you pick up the topic based on your own interest? How do you really do that?
I pick up the topic based on my own interest. Usually, I
Hmm.
have some free time in summers and winters when the semester
Hmm.
is over, and that is usually when I do most of these writings.
Hmm.
And yeah, so I think about so I had the conversation with Mukund again, who said, like,
Hmm.
we'll publish you in science. Try to find something topical.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so when Oppenheimer came out, Oppenheimer was of course topical.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
And yeah, usually I try to write about things that I know about, things that I would like to write about, which
Hmm.
makes it
Hmm.
easier to write articles on. And of
Nice.
course, I feel
Nice.
that in these times it's particularly important to communicate science to get people think in a more scientific way about everything,
Absolutely right. Absolutely right.
and
You're
that
absolutely
certainly
right.
plays a role.
It's such an important aspect of doing science itself nowadays, because no matter how much you are really doing cutting edge research, the interface with the society has now turned out to be very critical, right? For various different reasons. Yeah, for various different
Absolutely,
reasons.
but also in particular, the science we do is funded by the public. So I feel like,
Mm,
as the community of scientists, for scientists and the related ecosystem, there is some responsibility of
absolutely.
communicating whatever we have learned to the public,
Mm,
and also
absolutely
help
right.
develop the scientific temper, as
Mm,
our
mm,
institution calls it. So,
mm.
yeah, those are the kind of motivations of getting into
Very
science.
nice. Very nice. So you also blend this with your teaching. For example, I see one of the beautiful articles which you have written was also on A.K. Rai Chaudhary. I assume your research and the background of that particular article also overlap quite a bit. And you also blend that in your classroom, or how do you go about? Do you also bring in such kind of science writing aspect into your classroom, generally speaking?
Not consciously, but
Huh. Mm.
it's all part of communication and communication styles. So I
Yeah.
think some
Yeah.
of it definitely blends in when I teach, or when I
Mhm.
prepare my notes and so on.
Mm, mm.
And
That's
mean, yeah, yeah. So I think the way I communicate reflects both in the articles and in my teaching. But also,
yeah,
I really
yeah.
enjoy teaching. It's something that I did not expect to enjoy, but
Mhm,
it turned out to
mhm.
be something that's a lot of fun, actually.
Wow, very nice, very nice. So paint as a picture, also the process of writing itself, Nirmalya, because you know, you write on a topic which actually requires a deep mathematical kind of viewpoint to really bring out something more accurate aspect of the work, and to transfer that thinking to words, and then communicating it not only in a way that you are putting it in the right framework, but also something which is readable, which is equally an important kind of a task. How do you go about it? Because the transfer of information into the realm where you kind of put it in words must be something quite challenging, right?
Absolutely, and that
Yeah.
is both the challenging and the kind of fun aspect of it.
Fun.
To
Yeah.
try to come up with the kind of analogies where it would be something that people can relate to something every day. But of
Mm,
course,
mm,
these analogies, I mean, it's difficult to come up with them, and
mm,
it's also the difficulty is also the challenge and the fun of, how I can, make it something funny. So one of the things I had written about black hole information loss paradox was that it is like a locked room mystery.
mm, mm,
And that is one way of having a fun analogy for something that is
mm.
a physics concept.
Nice, nice.
So that way I really enjoy the this aspect of it, to finding
Mm.
analogies and finding creative analogies. So this is kind of a creative challenge itself.
Challenge. Yeah.
So the kind of creativity that this demands of you is
Mm, mm,
what makes it very fascinating and very fun for me. So a lot of time, and sometimes it's difficult, sometimes it's very difficult to find something that
mm,
is sufficiently. So you have to kind of balance between accuracy when you're
mm, mm,
communicating science. You have to balance between being accurate and being readable, being understandable, which is always a fun challenge to have. But it's also some of these articles can also be quite exhausting to write to, because
mm,
just
mm,
thinking of these analogies can be
mm.
quite demanding.
Demanding. Absolutely, absolutely. Especially if the balancing is very, very critical, right? That's another important aspect, to ensure that the accuracy is maintained to whatever extent you can push it, and yet not lose out on the audience who are reading it. And
Absolutely.
yeah. So, in the sense, you also write to a very broad audience. So, what has been your response? Because Twitter, or now X, is a kind of global square. It was, but now it's a randomized global square, and one would have to actually communicate with people from all walks of the life most of the time, especially who are online. I should also emphasize that. How has been your experience, Nimalya? Because your engagement actually is very high, and you also kind of write to audience where it is need not be just confined to India. A lot of people from abroad also read your tweets and your posts. How has been your experience in that particular sense?
Oh, it has been good. It has been a good experience. So one of the amazing things about exceptional things about Twitter or X has been that how
Mm,
quickly you can get engagement. I
mm,
mean, the engagement can spiral out very quickly. You can get like a million views on something you wrote,
mm.
and that is still something that boggles my mind. That
Yeah,
kind
it's
of
astonishing. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
you write something and then a million people have engaged with it. That is
Engage. Yes. Yes.
quite a strange thing still for me. And yeah, it has been a very positive experience because I got to interact with people
Mm,
from
mm.
from many different professions, and many a lot of scientists also, physicists also, who I would not otherwise have been able to interact
Be
with.
able to interact with. Yeah. In fact, I also came to know about you and your work through Twitter. I should mention that because
Yeah,
I
yeah, yeah.
knew
So
I had read some of your Wire articles. That was quite some time ago. I think 2019 or 20 or sometime I
right,
had
yes.
read. But connecting the dots is not easy, because then I realized that you were the same person who was doing that, and that's amazing actually.
So this podcast is happening because of Twitter, because Twitter created us. Yeah.
Yes, yes, absolutely, absolutely. Now later on, once I started actually doing this stuff, I generally track and also try to kind of understand what is the kind of work which is going on and things. Uh, so one more aspect related to your science communication is that you have to also interface with journalists, more so with either websites, news websites, or in some cases newspapers themselves. Uh, what do you think is the kind of response you get in that particular arena? Do you see that they are really up for science as a mainstream, or is it just a kind of a side part of a larger business what they run? How do you see that, Nirmalya?
I have not had a lot of interface with science journalists as such,
Mm, 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 mm.
so I can't, you know, answer that particular question. Whatever
Mhm.
interactions I have had have been on X, and they have been very positive. I think there are a lot of
Mm, mm.
the generation of science journalists and science communicators
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
who are very passionate and enthusiastic about it, and and are really trying to communicate science in a positive and good way. So
Absolutely, absolutely.
I feel very kind of, I try to keep track on that community. I follow
Mm,
as
mm,
many people as possible from that group of science communicators and journalists, and I
mm.
feel that there's really something good is going to. In India, we don't still don't have a lot of science communication,
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah,
and yeah, I think a lot of people are struggling for jobs and so on in the science communication, science journalism line, and it would be
mm,
good if we
mm.
have more of that, and more jobs and more opportunities for people really
Absolutely,
uh,
absolutely.
passionate about it.
Very true, very true. In fact, that's actually a excellent and a viable career for a lot of students also, right? Because
Absolutely,
if somebody is interested in the interface of science and also communicating science, which is now also an important part of a lot of research institutes and also IITs and ICERs and other places.
absolutely,
And in that sense also a lot of websites and newspapers like Hindu and Indian Express have already been doing very very some of the very good stuff. A lot of good coverage is happening. Even also some of the websites do a good job, but one of the concerns is also that there is sometimes there is in the name of communicating science, sometimes things get pushed in a very wrong direction, because of course that's one of the reasons why probably knowledgeable people should be able to communicate science more than just being in their laboratories and other places. But there is also do you think there is some kind of a danger that, for example, there can be some pseudoscience which can be propagated using YouTube and Twitter and other kind of arena? As you told, you can really go viral in very very quick pace. But there is also kind of content management is also an issue, right?
yeah, absolutely. I think this is age of virality, so things can go viral which are completely nonsensical, and it's
Mm,
also possible that some onus is also on scientists to communicate their work
absolutely.
in a honest way, and there's a because the a lot of pressure, career pressure on
Mm,
scientists,
mm,
there's a lot of
mm, mm,
tendency from scientists as well, and from their press officers or whatever, to hype up work
mm.
that is not should not have been hyped up.
Exactly. Mm,
There was something about a wormhole being built. There's a news of a wormhole has been built
mm.
somewhere, which was was more hype than anything real. And then the
Mm,
other case of LK-99, which took
mm, mm. Oh man.
real norm.
Yeah,
And, and
LK-99 for listeners is that room temperature superconductivity claim, which turned out to be false, and there was huge buzz. Right, that was very fascinating kind of an
yeah,
episode, so to speak.
it was absolutely, it went more viral than anything related to science
Yes.
that I've ever seen. And there was,
Yeah.
as you were saying, kind of pseudoscience people saying, "Oh no, this is going to transform the world in like a few
Mm.
months." So, so, so that kind of claims went viral, and people really got into it.
Yeah.
even without
Yeah.
checking, the paper has not been
Yeah.
published and the due
Yeah.
process has not been completed.
Mm.
Yeah, so there's definitely a need for people to step in and kind of communicate the correct science in a correct way.
Correct way. Absolutely. Absolutely. Wonderful, wonderful. That's very nice to know. So, what are your kind of upcoming and future plans, Nirmalya? How do you want to go about both in terms of research and your science outreach activities? What is the directions which you are taking going forward?
Well, I'm working on this field of holography, and
Mm,
that's where my research interest lies. And I'm also trying to
mm,
get into certain new fields of
mm,
cosmology in my research. So I have quite a few research PhD students now,
mm,
and
mm,
with them I'm trying to figure out certain problems in cosmology as well, and
mm,
also going back to my roots of quantum gravity, trying to understand it from a
mm.
holographic perspective. In research, in outreach, I plan to keep writing, and I'm hoping to now kind of switch to making a few videos,
Wonderful,
see how that
wonderful.
works. And
Yeah.
at some point, hopefully, I would like to make them in Hindi as well, so as to reach a bigger audience, because I
Yeah,
feel there's a lot
absolutely,
of
absolutely.
audience in India who are not able to access good science communication, because there's not a lot of it in vernaculars.
Yes,
So
yes.
I would definitely like to at some point try that. My Hindi is not great right now, but
But
hopefully.
your physics is good. That is a more important point. That is
Thank you. Yeah.
that's critical. Yeah, yeah. Because that is something wonderful, Nirmalya. Because that is probably one of the most important directions one can take, especially people who are doing research, who have access to primary sources. In fact, that is one of the kind of complaints I have for people who want to communicate science but may not have complete background. I'm no way actually discouraging them not to do it. But the
Mm.
issue is that you will see that a lot of people who do outreach, especially in the realm of, very interesting topics, including, let's say, quantum gravity or something like that, they generally tend to recycle the information.
Yeah.
For it is important that people who know the actual literature, who also have the kind of specific aspects and pros and cons of particular viewpoint, would probably can give us kind of information which is much more nuanced. Do you think that is an important thing, right?
Yeah, sure, sure. I think we need a whole range of different kind of approaches, and
Yeah, yeah,
it's an essential part of it to have like scientists give their like
yeah.
full nuanced description of things. So yeah, definitely. I also encourage students to, PhD
Yes,
students to
yes,
think about
exactly.
communicating science if there is
Absolutely.
something that they're into.
Into absolutely, because they are also kind of uniquely placed, because they have access to information, and also on a day-to-day basis probably they would also be looking at things in a slightly more granular way, and they'll be able to look at things in greater detail. And yeah, that would
Yeah,
be an
sure.
important aspect. Yeah. Great. So how has the life been in Mandi? It's a beautiful place, I've heard. Of course, I've never been there, but I
Oh, you
heard
should
that it's
really
one
come.
of the.
Please
Yeah,
come sometime. It's
yeah,
it's a
yeah,
great
sure.
place, no pollution, and it's a lot of
Yeah.
beautiful mountains. It's a little bit remote, but other than that,
Mm.
it's a good place to live in. Very chill, very laid back environment.
Wonderful, wonderful. So hopefully we'll have you again, Nirmalya,
Thank you,
on
Pavan.
the
Yeah, sure. Love
on
to be back.
Pratidwani.
Yes.
It's for the listeners. I should mention that I will be linking all the references in the show notes. And as I mentioned, Nirmalya has written quite a lot of interesting articles. It's also available on his webpage, which I'll be anyway linking on the show notes. Please have a look, and if you are not already following Nirmalya on X, you are missing out something very important. Because in my opinion, he's probably one of the best science communicators around,
Wow.
not just only in India but across the world. But one should really pay attention to some of the things what he's writing, which is equally interesting. So, Nirmalya, thank you very much for your time.
So much, Pavan, yeah, for
And
having me.
yeah,
To
yeah, yeah. And it's been a pleasure speaking to you. So I also kind of encourage students to go and read a lot of other interesting information, which you would probably explore from such kind of articles, which will help you to also understand things in a greater detail and depth. So this is Pratidwani, where we try to humanize science, and in this particular case, we had emerging science and emerging kind of prospect of science communication and research through Nirmalya Kajuri from IIT Mandi. Thank you, Nirmalya.
Thank you, Pawan.